Here's a Garrett 60-1 that had a P-trim turbine on it. The precision version of this would be called a 5976. Now, for this video, I want to give you some tips on how you can repair this turbo and kind of just make it better than it was from factory. First off, you could see where I put the compressor housing O-ring on it, and then the turbine wheel that I used was a 6266 turbine. The reason why I did the 6266 turbine was because I didn't have the P-trim turbine on hand. The other reason why is because it had a lot of pitting on the exhaust housing, so it was a good idea to machine out the exhaust housing to restore the tolerances. Also, the compressor plate was pretty messed up and it wouldn't collapse the seal properly, so I replaced that piece. Now this compressor plate is called a T04S, and here's our T04E rebuild kit. This also works for the T04S turbos with a 6.35 millimeter shaft bore. If you put a socket on the compressor nut, it will be 10 millimeter or 3/8. Here's a shot of the thrust bearing. This is why we're rebuilding this turbo in the first place, because this turbo was rebuilt recently, but it had this steel thrust bearing in it, and they usually just burn up and cause a lot of problems and overheat the thrust bearing, usually just wear out, even if you oil them properly. The back plate that we used to replace this, the original one, is an iron piece. I think this one's called a T04R. The only difference is that it's a cast iron piece, or it could be called a T04Z. Either way, it doesn't matter which plate you use as long as it's a 5mm superback T04S to match the compressor housing. Now if you had a T04E compressor housing, you will need a T04E compressor plate. Here's a look at the turbine housing after I did all the machine work. I also have a CNC machine. If you've seen my other videos, you can watch some videos where I show you how I use the CNC machine to do all my work. Here's a look comparing the P-trim turbine to the 6266 turbine. The P-trim turbine measures 64.5 by 72. The 6266 and 6766 turbine measures 65.8 by 72 millimeter. Like I said, the reason why I used this turbine was because I didn't have the P-trim turbine in stock. The one I just showed you is actually the same as the GT37R. Now, if I use the GT37R turbine, I could have converted this turbo over to ball bearing, but I don't have any cages in stock right now to convert it over to ball bearing, which is the reason why I just did a basic rebuild and upgraded it to the 6266 turbine. I will link to all the products that I use to do this build. Keep in mind, if you do have the T04S compressor plate and you do want to use the O-ring, leave a note in the description box upon checkout of buying the T04E kit that you need the compressor housing O-ring for the T04S seal plate, which is the same as the KO3 compressor housing O-ring. Keep in mind that machining is required for a compressor housing O-ring to sit on the T04S seal plate. The T04S seal plate normally did not come with an O-ring at all, and this is the reason why we wanted to add an O-ring there. Be sure to measure the shaft bore of the shaft where the compressor wheel sits. It should be 6.35 millimeter. If you do have a 7.93 millimeter shaft bore, that means you have a big shaft turbo, which this is not the same rebuild kit, and none of these parts will work for that turbo. If you want to see more videos on turbo repair, you can watch other videos on my channel, and also be sure to subscribe if you want to see the latest content.